been a remote worker now for a number of years, so it's really interesting to sit back and read or listen to the Dave Ramseys out there that talk about how useless and terrible we all are, how lazy and incompetent and communist, and we're just terrible because we're wearing our sweatpants all the time. We don't contribute anything and we don't know how to work with others. It's always been really amusing to listen to. And then you do have people that say, I'm so glad the pandemic's over. I love being back in the office. And because of that, remote work is garbage. Listen, if you like being in the office, that's fine. But saying that remote work is garbage as a blanket statement, just because it doesn't appeal to you, well, that's kind of ignorant. I mean, if you want to pay the extra money in gasoline and transportation every single day, if you want to spend the extra 2 to 3 hours in traffic commuting, that's up to you. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money or your time. However, there are those of us out there, the introverts, that prefer to not be surrounded by people all the time. All right, I don't like being crowded. It's a big reason I don't go to concerts anymore or just any place that's heavily populated. I don't like big crowds. And I also really like the fact that the miles that are on my vehicle are miles that I've put on doing things that I enjoy. I didn't put on miles on my vehicle in long commutes, driving into the city to work for a company that does not give two shits about me. And I do respect the opinions of others who say remote work is not right for them. You're totally entitled to that. I won't argue that one bit. But I will say that there are people out there that like being remote workers. They prefer remote work, but they shouldn't be remote workers. They aren't the right people for it. But what the remote world showed me was that companies needed to start changing how they hire people. So even if you're hiring people for a non-tech role, I felt it was very important to screen people in basic technical skills. And in my opinion, this is where a lot of companies have failed. And I'm not saying that you have to be a software engineer or know any programming languages or even understand the different versions of Linux. Okay, it's nothing like that. However, if you're one of those people that drags down the support team of your company because the internet on your computer stopped working, only to find out that you hadn't been paying your internet bill, I'm sorry, but if you're that kind of person, you should not be working remotely. You should be in an office. And certainly people will disagree with me on this one. We're all entitled to our opinion, but my opinion will stay that I believe if you want to be a remote worker in this world and not make remote workers look bad, you need to step it up a little bit when it comes to competence using a computer. Remote work definitely shined a huge spotlight on the poor communication skills of people, not being able to describe the problem that they want solved. They know what the problem is, they know they're unhappy about something, but they have no idea how to put it into words. You know, in the past, you would get like this email or a support ticket in the system, and it would be poorly written, poorly worded, and then you'd be like, all right, I'm just going to walk down to the desk and see what's going on. Of course, you could jump on a Zoom call, and that's mildly helpful, but it was never quite as effective. And I do think this is a different problem from being technically incompetent, because there's certainly a good number of software engineers that I've worked with that just couldn't explain themselves worth a damn in an email. And this is something I had to address with myself. I had to reflect on the fact that people would have to follow up with me from time to time to get more information, to get more clarity. And that told me that if I wanted to be a remote worker, I really had to step it up with my written communication. So I'm just giving an example that, no, I wasn't perfect out the door either at remote work. There was definitely some ramping up and some improvements I had to make for myself. And these were things that I completely ignored because it was never a problem in the office. Or at least I never thought it was a problem. And now as I look back on it, I realize I probably could have been a lot better even in the office if I had improved my communication skills back then. And if it wasn't for the pandemic, I don't know if I would have ever addressed that problem with myself. When I realized what the problem was and that I wanted to stay a remote worker, it became very clear the things that I needed to improve about myself. And so if you're a remote worker like me, I ask, what have you done in self-reflection to improve yourself? And I'm not talking about the annual self-reviews that companies do. I think there's something deeper to that, to actually look in the mirror, physically look in the mirror at yourself and realize, hey, if I want to look competent as a remote worker, if I want this privilege of staying at home in my sweatpants, not doing pain in the ass commutes, what do I have to improve about myself to make me better at working from home? I could keep cherry picking out examples from former colleagues or myself, but overall, I think the message is pretty clear. I think remote work is a good thing. I think it's a good option people should have. I think it's good for the environment. I think it's good for traffic. Overall, I think it's here to stay. However, it does shine a huge spotlight on our flaws. And if we're not willing to reflect on these flaws and address them, I think it's going to be harder for companies in the future to have an open mind to remote work. And last but not least, if you're one of those people like me out there that would love to be self-employed, have your own little business, like, right, I would love to do maybe photography or video or even YouTube full time, that is working at home. All right, but you're not going to have bosses or pips or performance reviews over you to keep you in line. So it's going to demand a lot more out of you as far as discipline and work ethic. And I think the reality is, if you want to be self-employed, have your own little business sometime, but you couldn't handle working remotely, maybe you want to rethink what kind of business you want to have, the kind of work you want to have. Because you might be working alone, you might be working by yourself, you probably won't have a big company and big support network for your day-to-day tasks. And I think this is where a lot of people fail when they try to start their own businesses. They're used to that support blanket that keeps them going. Now, I saw this when I worked in the big visual effects studios. I saw people leave the big studios for small studios. They would get offered a great big pay bump, their big promotion, and they're going there as a hot jock, right? They're coming out of a big company like Industrial Light and Magic or Sony ImageWorks to some little no-name shop. And they're just the hottest shit because they worked on all these big productions. But what is interesting is when I talked to people they worked with in these little shops, they were like, this guy was so useless. He didn't understand how to work. He didn't have all the custom plugins. He didn't have the support network. He just got the bare bones application, the 3D application that we would work in, without any add-ons, without any customizations. And he didn't realize how much support went into his workflow and pipeline every single day. And it was really quite astonishing how ineffective they were going from a big studio to a small studio. Kind of similar to that is I remember talking to one of my friends who worked at Weta Digital on Avatar, and he was talking about some of the best texture artists he ever knew started out as video game texture artists. Because especially in older video games, you would get a very, very small resolution to paint in, and usually a very limited color palette. So if you look at like games like World of Warcraft, the online games, you know, the textures on the shields and the armor, if you look at them, they're really not detailed, but they're convincing. You know, they look good. And these were people that were given a very small window to work in, and they had all these restrictions. And during that time, they learned how to refine their skills with all those restrictions. Then they move on to a big film like Avatar, and they're pretty much given unlimited resolution and unlimited colors. And I think from there, the results speak for itself. Granted, I didn't care for Avatar 2 as far as the story goes, but y'all gotta admit, Avatar 1 was pretty damn impressive. So on the flip side of that, he would talk about artists who started out in film, right? They had unlimited canvases to work with, unlimited colors, but then they transitioned over to games. And then games is like, well, no, this is the size you have to work in, and these are the colors you have to use, and you have to produce something that looks like this. And suddenly they're confronted with limitations, restrictions. They don't get everything they want. And so my friend, who also floated between film and video games, said one thing he noticed was when you had artists that came from film working with pretty much unlimited canvas size and colors to video games where they were restricted in resolution and colors had a really hard time scaling down. They really struggled to work and deliver within these limitations. And I think kind of the same thing applies for remote work or self-employed. Now you're potentially hundreds of miles away from people that would normally help you in your day-to-day job. So your window of support gets smaller, right? As opposed to the office where it was like, I have all these people around me that can help me. I have the support line. I have all these people who run down to my desk and give me a hand when I run into problems. But now you're sitting at home in your kitchen and you're having an issue with your computer's internet. And there's nobody there that's going to show up to your house, go through your bills, and make sure you've been paying your internet on time. That is up to you. Now, I'm sure there's probably a good number of you out there that are going to have a hard time relating to this because you probably got your shit together, all right? Or at least you think you do, because I certainly thought I did. And it took remote work to help me realize where I needed to shape up in quite a few places. So this is something that's been bouncing around in my head for a while, and I just want to take the opportunity to sit down and just get it out, just talk about it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You downvote me and leave a nasty comment? I mean, big deal. Big deal. I don't really care. Well, that's all I have for this video. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time.